The Law of Dependent Arising. The Secret to Bondage and Release. Sermon 19 by Bhikkhu K Ñāṇananda. Narrated by Bhikkhu Candana. Pahankanua Sermon number 201. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage be to the Fortunate One, the worthy, fully enlightened. Yankinchi dukkhang sambhoti sabbang ahara paccaya aharanang nirodhena nati dukkhassa sambhavo. Etamadi navang nyatva dukkhang ahara paccaya sabbaharang parinyaya sabbahara manisito arogyang sammadanyaya asavanang parikkaya sankhaya sevi dhammato sanghang nopeti vedagu. Dvayatanupasana Sutta, Sutta Nibbāna. Dear listeners, life of beings is dependent on food, but concealed within food is found craving, which increases the misery of existence. As a result, the Buddha was compelled to present to the world an extraordinary vision based on nutriment. Full expression is given to this vision in 3 of the verses in the Dvayatanupasana Sutta in the Sutta Nibbāna, which I have selected as the topic of this 19th discourse on the law of dependent arising. In several of our earlier discourses, we have drawn your attention to the style of presentation in this sutta. To state briefly, it is a style of presenting facts for the contemplation of the nature of arising and ceasing. In this context, the Buddha presents, for the first time, the method of dual contemplation on nutriment with regard to arising and ceasing aspects. He introduces it as follows. Monks, if someone inquires whether there could be another mode of contemplating dualities, you must reply in the affirmative. How is it possible? Whatever suffering arises, all that has nutriment as condition. This is one mode of contemplation. With the total detachment and cessation of grasping towards nutriments, suffering ceases to be. This is the second mode of contemplation. A monk who practices this dual technique of contemplation, striving hard to burn out the defilements, kilesha, with vigilance, can expect one of these 2 rewards, either arahanthood in this very life, or the attainment of a non-returner in case a trace of grasping remains. The above 3 verses were uttered to clarify this point further. Yankinchi dukkhang sambhoti sabbang ahara paccaya. Whatever suffering arises, all that is dependent on nutriment. Aharanang nirodhena nati dukkhassa sambhavo. With the cessation of nutriment, there is no arising of suffering. Etamadi navang nyatva dukkhang ahara paccaya. Knowing the consequences of suffering dependent on nutriment, sabbaharang parinyaya sabbahara manisito. With complete understanding of nutriment, with detachment towards nutriment, arogyang sammadanyaya asavanang parikkaya. With the perfect understanding of health, through the elimination of influxes, sankhaya sevi dhammato sankhang nopeti vedagu. The Arahant, who has the 3-fold higher knowledge and is firmly established in the Dhamma, does not come into reckoning. The vision on nutriment presented in these 3 verses is extremely deep. The Ahara Sutta of the Ahara Vagga in the Ahara Sangyutta found in the Sangyutta Nikaya presents a totally different attitude towards nutriment than that of the ordinary world. This is how the Buddha explains it to the monks. Chattaro me bhikkhave ahara bhutanaṃ va sattanaṃ tithya sambhavesinang va anuggahaya katame chattaro kabalimkyaro aharo olariko va sukhumo va passo dutiyo mano sanchetana tatiya vinyanang chatuthang. Monks, there are 4 types of nutriments available for the maintenance of beings born, and for the welfare of those seeking birth. What are they? Material food, either gross or soft, that can be made into lumps. Contact is the second. Mental intentions is the third. Consciousness is the fourth. The root cause for all 4, according to the Buddha, is craving. Ime ca bhikkhave chattaro ahara tanha nidāna tanha samudaya tanha jātika tanha pabbhava. These 4 types of nutriments have craving as their cause. Craving as the reason for arising. Craving as the place of origin, and craving as the place of birth. We come across another amazing account on this subject in the simile of the flesh of a son, in the Nibbāna Sangyutta. Although we have made general references to it earlier, I hope to analyze it now in direct reference to the law of dependent arising. In this discourse on the flesh of a son, capable of arousing intense emotions, the Buddha presents some valuable facts, as good as objects of meditation in condensed form. Let me first quote the Buddha word as it is. Monks, imagine a couple who enters a desert track with their only loving son, equipped with a small quantity of simple requirements. Halfway through, finding their food exhausted, the couple, confidentially surveying their plight, decided to kill the son. They killed their only son, made an edible preparation of the flesh and the fleshy bones, and managed to traverse the rest of the journey. Had they not killed the son, all 3 would have perished. But as they ate the meat, being overpowered by intense grief, they beat their chests, lamenting, "Where is our only son?" At the end of the narrative, the Buddha asked the monks a question. Monks, what do you think? Did those parents consume their only son's flesh as a sport or enjoyment, for strength or appearance or adornment? Certainly not, replied the monks. Monks, did not the parents consume the flesh of the child merely to cross over the desert? Make note of the term merely. Yes, Venerable Sir, responded the monks. The fable ends there. Now, the Buddha sets about to drive home the hard facts related to food. Monks, gross food has to be treated as illustrated in the simile. It has its rewards. A deep understanding of gross material food, partaken of in lumps, is equal to an understanding of lust in relation to the 5-fold sensuality. The noble disciple who grasps this fact of reality will attain the fruit of a non-returner. He will not return to this world. That is the Buddha's teaching. At this point, we are compelled, though reluctantly, to expose the immature, childish story replaced by the commentator, which underestimates the significance of the Buddha's message. What did the man and wife traversing the desert do when they ran out of food? They sat down under a particular tree with few leaves and had a confidential discussion. The husband said, "We have no more food. It is not possible to provide for you by farming or trade. The only possible solution is for you to kill me and reach your destination with the child." Then the wife replied, "I am unable to earn a living in this desert by an occupation such as weaving thread. So I suggest that you kill me and cross the desert with the child." To this the husband responded, "The child will not survive if the mother is dead. The only obvious alternative is to kill the child and feed on the flesh until we cross the desert. If we survive, we have the possibility of getting another son." Agreeing to this plan, the mother sent the son to the father. Recalling the trouble he went through in order to bring him up, the father refused to kill him and sent him back to the mother. Thinking of the innumerable prayers offered to the gods and the pain she bore for 10 months, the mother couldn't kill the son. The boy, walking between the mother and the father continuously, but mind you, under that tree with few leaves, fell down dead. Then the parents, after much lamenting and grieving, fed on the flesh. Do you notice how the sensitivity found in the Buddha's story has been revised in the second? I would like to add my comments here. Those who read the Dhamma and the Vinaya today in Sinhala hear of this childish story only. Can you see how the Buddha's teachings are undermined? Perhaps the commentators feared that the earlier story would encourage parents to kill their children. But the Buddha's intention was to show how dangerous the desire for food taken as a whole can be. The idea here is very deep indeed. In case you, my listeners, too have your doubts, let me annex another simile here. You may have perhaps read the Buddha's simile on dhatu manasikara, attention on the primaries, about a butcher. A certain butcher or his apprentice slaughters a cow, slices it, and sells it at a crossroad. Nobody thinks of the flesh in terms of a cow. Similarly, says the Buddha, a meditator should survey his own body by dissecting into the 4 elements, earth, water, fire, and wind. Thereby, the Buddha doesn't encourage slaughter of animals. It is only a simile. A butcher is a merciless person who slaughters, cuts into parts, and sells cattle with cruelty. The Buddha's advice was to dissect the body one loves into the 4 elements as an object of contemplation. That is the message behind the simile. Another doubt crops up regarding the simile of the son's flesh. Since vegetarianism and meat eating are common subjects for discussion today, one might misunderstand this as an approval of meat eating. The sole purpose of the simile here is to expose the danger concerning food in general. When discussing this topic once, I said if a grain of rice on our plate could speak, it would pour out the painful experience of misery in its life. With the introduction of agrochemicals that terminate thousands of insects, the grain of rice will not only complain but shed bitter tears, if it was possible. On the whole, food is a source of unhappiness. The purpose of the above simile was to bring about disillusionment regarding gross or delicate food, partaken of in lumps, whether with or without meat. It must not be misinterpreted. I will touch on this again later. Let us move on to contact as nutriment, pasahara. How, monks, must contact as nutriment be understood? Imagine a cow with infected skin, nicchamagavi. The reference is not to a totally skinned cow in a slaughterhouse, but to a cow with exposed wounds due to skin infection. If this cow stands by a wall, insects there would attack the wounds. If she rests under a tree, the insects on the tree would attack her. If she gets into the water, insects in the water would harass her. In an open area, animal life associated with the sky would inflict pain on her. Wherever the cow is, she has no escape. That is how contact nutriment should be understood, says the Buddha. If correctly understood, its advantages are many. First, it gives a profound understanding of the three aspects of feeling, Vedana, as pleasant, painful, and neither pleasant nor painful. If a noble disciple reaches this level of understanding, nothing more remains for him to do. He becomes an arahant. The Buddha reveals the strength of feeling, Vedana, as an object of meditation. Considering the depth of the simile, I would like to offer a brief commentary here. We know that feeling is dependent on contact. Bodily contact rests entirely on the soft skin, as we all know. Let's imagine we have a wound on the right arm. A slight rub on the left arm with a velvet cloth brings immense comfort, but the same impact on the right arm will cause the arm to be withdrawn with pain. Condensing and simplifying the statement of the Buddha, one should say he is comparing the pleasant feeling on the skin and the painful feeling on the raw flesh. In the ultimate sense, the skin is a mere bandage round a wound. If the entire body is a wound, a disease, and an ulcer, the skin is the bandage. As taught in the contemplation of impurities, asubha bhavana, as gandhabhuto, rogabhuto, vanabhuto. This subject of meditation leads one to disillusionment regarding contact and the attainment of Nibbāna. That is the nutriment of contact. The next is mental intentions as food, mano sanchetana ahara. How, monks, should the food of mental intentions be identified? Another simile is given here, deep in meaning. There is a pit of burning embers, as deep as the height of a man. It emits no smoke or flames. A man who longs to live but fears death, longs for enjoyment but fears pain, approaches this pit. Two strong men grip him by his arms and drag him towards the pit. Although he is physically drawn towards the cold pit, his intention, cetana, his aspiration, patthana, his resolve, paniddhi, is bent away from it. He wriggles about, but is dragged on. That is the simile. Next, the Buddha applies it to the subject. Monks, that is how mental intentions should be understood. The noble disciple who has the full understanding of the nutriment of mental intentions will attain full realization of the craving for sensuality, the craving for existence, and the craving of annihilation. Kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. To him who reaches this level of purity, arahanthood is certain. Here too a short commentary seems necessary. What is the painful nature of mental intentions? Here is an example. We have to find the money tomorrow to settle a heavy loan. Can we fall asleep, relaxed, tonight? We might toss and turn in bed, and our thoughts might torment us. Mental intentions, mano sancetana, will drag us away forcibly. Here is another example. The deer runs after the mirage due to craving for water. It runs due to this deception there is water. It keeps running. Although too exhausted to keep running, it drags itself forward, prompted by craving. Watching the behavior of mental intentions, one can understand the nature of craving. I think that is enough about mano sancetana. The last one, nutriment of consciousness, is the most subtle of the four. Monks, how would you understand the nutriment of consciousness? Vijnana ahara. This is the simile given. The ministers or the executioners catch hold of a criminal and present him before the king for the final verdict. In the morning the king orders that 100 stabs be inflicted on him with a sharp knife, known as adayati. At noon the king is informed that the criminal was still alive. A repetition of the punishment is ordered. Again in the evening another round of 100 stabs was inflicted on him. Now the Buddha questions the monks. Monks, what do you think? Does this man, who is inflicted with 300 stabs a day with a sharp knife, experience pain? Why not, Venerable Sir? Even a single stab would definitely bring pain and distress on him. The simile ends there. The Buddha says, that is how, monks, the nutriment of consciousness should be understood. A thorough understanding of the nutriment of consciousness will lead to the understanding of name and form. The noble disciple who reaches this level of understanding has nothing more to do. That is the nutriment of consciousness, the most difficult to comprehend. No one likes to treat consciousness as misery. In place of the adayati story, a simple but modern illustration will make this clear. TV addicts face continuous attacks from morning till night, not with the adayati of ancient times, but, if I may coin a new word to suit modern times, with the adyati, blows leveled against them by the business executioner of the commercial world. Here is another illustration. When you enter a street at night, electric bulbs in some business places keep winking so as to draw our attention and to tempt us through subtle devices. The worldlings cannot realize the misery within this, due to the presence of consciousness. We have come through samsara, suffering, severe adayati, blows, but totally ignorant of name and form, the mischief maker behind it. The meditators have to understand the rest through meditation. He who realizes fully the functioning of the nutriment of consciousness attains arahanthood. Let me emphasize another aspect on the subject of nutriments. Life depends on nutriments. We cannot do without it. What follows is deep. You know, the Buddha spent 6 years of physical torture. The Nigantas advocated self-mortification as the only way to happiness. Self-mortification was the most favored path, both among the ascetics and Brahmins. So, naturally, the Buddha too went to its extreme until he collapsed by fasting. Through trial and error, he realized the only solution to suffering was the middle path. We have discussed earlier a sutta that discusses the middle path, which we wish to touch on briefly. Once, a certain bhikkhuni, instigated by hidden evil intentions, invited Venerable Ñāṇananda on the pretext of listening to a discourse. Venerable Ñāṇananda, reading her mind, delivered a discourse based on 4 subtopics. The first topic is very much relevant to us. This is how it is presented. Ahara sambhuto bhagini ayankayo. Aharang nisaya aharo pahatabbo. Sister, this body is made up of nutriment. With the help of nutriment, should nutriment be eliminated? It is a puzzling statement, but the middle path lies therein. Venerable Ñāṇananda gives a brief explanation as to how nutriment can be instrumental in eliminating nutriment. You listeners are familiar with these facts. Monks are advised not to avoid food totally, but to contemplate while partaking of food. With a clear perspective of the purpose of eating, it has to be converted into a subject of meditation through the restraint of wisdom, Jnana Samvara. A monk, when partaking of food, contemplates as follows with wisdom. I partake of this food not for enjoyment or strength or adornment or beautification. Patisankhayo neva davaya namadaya namandanaya navibhusanaya. Merely yavadeva, for the maintenance of this body, imassa kayasa titya, for survival, yapanaya, to refrain from destruction to life, vihingsu paratiya, for the fulfillment of higher life, brahmacharya nuggahaya. I shall thus dispel the pain of hunger and prevent the arising of any future pain by overeating. Iti puranang ca vedanang patikankhami, navancha vedanang na uppadissami. In this journey of life, I shall deviate from wrong, being frugal in food and other requirements. Yatra ca me bhavissati. To this noble quest in life, meditative monks add a subject of meditation. Its purpose is indicated as follows. This food is merely a speck of the elements, dhatu mattako. It is a preparation consisting of earth, water, heat, and wind. Taken in terms of elements, it is clean, but after entering this putrid body, imang putikayang patva, it becomes extremely repulsive. Ativya jiguchhaniyo jayati. This statement includes both subjects of meditation, contemplation on the elements, and the repulsiveness of food. That is how food is converted into a subject of meditation. Finally, contemplation on the elements leads to emptiness, sunyata. This mere speck of the elements is essenceless, dhatu mattako sunyo. This alms food is subject to conditionality. The individual partaking of it is not a being or a living entity, but an essenceless speck of the elements. This alms food, which is not loathsome, becomes extremely repulsive after entering this body. Yatha pacchayang pavattamanang dhatu mattamevetang yadidang pindapato tadupabhunjako cha puggalo dhatu mattako nissatto nijjivo sunyo sabbopanayang pindapato ajiguchhaniyo imang putikayang patva ativya jiguchhaniyo jayati. This alms food, as a requisite, is nothing but a speck from the elements. He who partakes of it is not a being or a living thing, but a mere empty speck of elements. This alms food, though clean, would become extremely repulsive once inside the foul body. This clarifies how one realizes the void, essencelessness, through contemplation on the elements. Contemplation on repulsiveness leads one to disillusionment, to letting go. Freedom from food, elimination of food, is suggestive of the dispelling of craving. There lies the middle path. The Sabbasava Sutta further clarifies this point. As we proceed in life, we encounter certain things we can neither manage with nor without. The Buddha realized that food is one such requirement. The middle path has to be followed regarding food. Instead of rejecting it altogether, one partakes of food perfectly aware of its limitations, mattanyu, with Nibbāna as the goal. Many other similes can be cited that are extremely effective in causing disillusionment towards food. Kurangva maduna littang and kuradharupamo bhava are two wonderful similes mentioned earlier. A man fond of honey is offered a generous dose of it, spread on a razor blade. He cannot enjoy it without risking his tongue. This simile helps to eliminate the greed for taste. Partaking of food is similar to applying medication on a wound, vanassa ropanataya, and lubricating the axle of the cart. Akasabhanjanang yatha are two similes that clarify the place of food on the path to Nibbāna. Food is not a source of pleasure, but an essential commodity to carry the five aggregates across the desert of samsara safely, not different from oiling the axle of a wheel. The simile of the sun's flesh is also applicable here, although it stirs the emotions as well. The Buddha explains the repulsive nature of food inside the body and the importance of adopting the middle path with regard to food. It is further explained in such suttas as the Ogha Tarana Sutta. If a person, on getting into a river with a strong current to cross over, stops there without moving, he will sink. If he wriggles about, he'll get washed away. Wriggling is compared to self-mortification, or rejecting all food. Stopping is compared to self-indulgence, or endless consumption of food. Avoiding both these extremes, one should eat only what is required for survival. Mattanyu hohi bhojane. Know your limit when eating. Venerable Sariputta's advice to meditative monks is to refrain from eating the last 4 or 5 mouthfuls of food, so as to drink enough water. Chattaro pancha alope abutva udakang pive. This gives ease and lightness for meditation. By means of various similes, the middle path regarding food has been always emphasized. The topic of food is so important that the first of the 10 questions asked at the higher ordination of novice Arahant Sopaka was based on food. You may have heard of it, perhaps. Sabbe satta aharattitika. Although this is subject to ridicule today, a deep understanding of this will lead to dejection, detachment, and cessation, which leads to Nibbāna. In the Sammaditthi Sutta, we meet Venerable Sariputta analyzing right view in its diverse aspects, one after the other in response to the inquiry, "Do you know yet another analysis?" According to one mode of analysis, based on the pattern of the 4 truths, if a monk has a comprehensive understanding of a nutriment, the arising of nutriment, the cessation of nutriment, and lastly, the path leading to the cessation of nutriment, that alone can arouse correct view in him, and practice the 4 truths regarding nutriment meaningfully. Nutriment is of 4 kinds: gross material food consumed in lumps, contact nutriment, nutriment of mental intentions, and nutriment of consciousness. Understanding them at depth is to understand the misery associated with nutriment. The nature of craving underlying it represents the second noble truth. Cessation here stands for Nibbāna. The path is the middle path called Patisankha-yoniso, or the restraint through wisdom, or in other words, partaking of food wisely, reiterating its purpose as an object of meditation. The last verse touched on a very profound aspect of the topic. Arogyang sammadanyaya asavānaṃ parikkaya sankhaya sevi dhammato sankhang nopeti vedagu. Let's go through its meaning again. Arogyang sammadanyaya. We partake food in order to maintain health. But the implication in this line is deeper than that. It refers not merely to physical health, but enduring health, which is Nibbāna. Arogyang sammadanyaya, understanding good health well. Asavānaṃ parikkaya, through the destruction of influxes. Sankhaya sevi dhammato, well established in the Dhamma. Sanghang nopeti vedagu. Vedagu refers to an arahant endowed with threefold knowledge, and not a Brahmin learned in the three Vedas. Sanghang nopeti is not reckoned, is a complicating concept which deserves some thought. Then let us discuss it at this point. There is another sutta called the Athiraga Sutta that mentions the 4 types of nutriments with a subtle simile. To begin with, the Buddha explains the 4 types of nutriments. Then 3 very significant words are introduced. If a disciple has passion, raga, towards nutriment, pleasure, nandi, towards nutriment, and craving, tanha, towards nutriment, its consequences are pointed out. If someone has passion, pleasure, and craving towards, let us say, gross food, which is made into lumps for eating, the consciousness gets established and strengthens itself. Many are interested in the secret of rebirth, an intricate subject. If passion, pleasure, and craving are present towards nutriment, the consciousness towards nutriment gets established and strengthens. From then onwards, the process of Paṭicca Samuppāda is activated. Wherever consciousness gets established and grows, name and form activates itself there. Wherever name and form is established, preparations are activated. Wherever preparations are established, there ayating punabhava bhinibbati, another existence takes place. Existence gives rise to birth, decay, death. This is a very subtle point to grasp. This process is described in relation to gross food, ahara, contact, passa, mental intentions, mano sanchetana, as well as consciousness, vijnana. Attachment, pleasure, or craving towards either of these 4 types of nutriments leads to existence, bhava, with the consciousness well established there. It is followed by name and form, nama-rupa, preparations, sankhara, and then birth takes place. The subtleness in this account is centered round the simile used by the Buddha. Monks, if a dyer or a painter were to paint on a smooth board or a wall or a cloth using a rusty red, yellow, or light red paint, now read the rest carefully. In the same way is created a figure of a male or a female with details complete. Now connect what was said. If at this point attachment, pleasure, and craving are present towards nutriment, another birth is possible. Similar to a film reflected on a screen, the figure of the male or the female that seeks rebirth is registered on the fetus in the mother's womb, which we call the muddy patch. The Buddha discusses this at depth as if he was painting a picture. At this stage, the three defilements, passion, pleasure, and craving, raga, nandi, tanha, add a certain hue to the consciousness. That is what we call name and form. In brief, it is a form in conformity with the name reflected on the consciousness. This is made explicit by the simile of the painter. This process takes place as long as the threefold nutriments of consciousness, i.e., passion, pleasure, and craving, last. A person excessively fond of food may perhaps be born as a worm or a pig. It happens due to attachment to food. This illustrates the interrelatedness between consciousness and name and form. The simile of the painter symbolizes defilements. The Buddha then deals with the opposite tendency with a deeper significance, which is a mystery to many. If one has no passion or pleasure or craving towards the four types of nutriments, etc., here the Buddha brings out an amazing simile. Monks, there is a pavilion with windows on the north, south, and east. When the sun rises, monks, where will the sun's rays fall? On the western wall, Venerable Sir. If there was no wall on the west, in that case, on the earth, Venerable Sir. If there was no earth, on the water. If there was no earth, well, if there was no water, in that case, Venerable Sir, the sun's rays will not be established anywhere. The word used here is apatiṭṭhita, not established. Can you see how deep its significance is? Venerable Sir, if the sun's rays do not fall on the wall, or the earth, or on the water, then it is not established. Apatiṭṭhita. We have earlier introduced the term anidassana vijnana, non-manifestative consciousness. In the absence of passion, pleasure, or craving, consciousness is unable to establish itself. In explaining the meaning of anidassana, the simile of the painter suggests a mental state where there is nothing to be seen, to be revealed. We have explained this position based on a simile in the Kakachupama Sutta. Here too, the question-answer method is used. A man appears with some color paints and a brush, and declares that he would paint a picture in the sky, says the Buddha. Monks, do you think it is possible? No, Venerable Sir, it is not possible, because ayang hi bhante akaso arupi anidassano. This sky is formless and is not capable of showing or revealing anything. This is a subtle point many cannot understand. We have discussed the significance of anidassana vijnana in the discourses on Nibbāna. Vijnanang anidassanang anantang sabbato pabhang etha apo cha pathavi tejo vajo na gadhati etha digancha rasancha anungthulang subha subang etha namancha rupancha asesang uparujjati vijnanasya nirodhena ethetang uparujjati. This verse remained an unresolved mystery forever so long. Some interpreted it as a peculiar world. We have pointed out that the consciousness is there, vijnanang anidassanang, but the released consciousness, vimutta vijnana, does not reflect name and form. Next, it discusses the characteristics of name and form, anantang, as in the simile where there was no place for the sun's rays to fall. It is similar to that. Anantang sabbato pabhang, etha apocha patavi, tejo vajo na gadhati. In this vijnana, the four elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, can have no footing. Why? Contemplation on the four elements have brought about disillusionment. If this idea is attached to the story of rebirth discussed earlier, it would appear as follows. If the consciousness, vijnana, does not clasp the four elements firmly, gives up attachment towards them, then etha apocha patavi tejo vajo na gadhati. The four elements have no place in the consciousness. On the other hand, if earth, water, fire, and wind are present, the notion of long and short is present. Now think of its applicability to the painter. Etha dighangcha rassangcha. Otherwise, the concepts of long, short would be inapplicable. Subha subhang, beautiful or repulsive, would also be inapplicable. As mentioned in the story, the figure of a man or woman is drawn with all the details. As long as raga, nandi, and tanha, passion, pleasure, and craving are present, the human figure acquires its relevant colors automatically. The paint here is lust. But in the consciousness that is released, called anidassana vijnana, name and form does not reflect itself. The verse vijnanam anidassanam is extremely deep in meaning, as you can see. Finally, it says, Ettha namancha rupancha asesang uparujjati. Name and form is totally cut off here. Vijnanasa nirodhena, with the cessation of consciousness. The implication behind this phrase is not understood by many. This is not a reference to the prepared and specially prepared consciousness. By consciousness, we mean the consciousness that is accompanied by name and form. The worldlings do not know of the other consciousness, which is identified as the ceased consciousness, niruddha vijnana. How does it cease? It has no foundation or object. That is what is described as appatittang anarammanam in talking of an arahant's mind. You may have heard that the void state is referred to as animitta, signless, appatittita, not established, sunyata, empty and void, devoid of self. It is this void state that is emphasized. In support of this position, here are two verses from the Dhammapada. Ye sanga sannichayo nati, ye pariññāta bhojana, sunyato animitto cha, vimokho yesa gocharo, akaseva sakuntānaṃ, gati te sang durannaya. This verse 2 is deep in meaning. Ye sang sannichayo nati. They have no accumulated load. Ye pariññāta bhojana. Understood the intricacies of nutriment. Sunyato animitto cha vimokho yesa gocharo, whose pasture ground is void, signless, has the nature of release. Nutriment is not their prey. Realizing the void inherent in nutriment, the arahants conduct themselves with ease in their signless, essenceless pastures. The path they traverse is not visible. Akaseva sakuntānaṃ gati te sang durannaya. Like the path taken by the birds in the sky, the course taken by the arahant's mind is untraceable due to its signless, unestablished nature. Deities and Brahmins venerating the Arahants say they are unable to trace the object of the mind of the Arahants who have attained the Arahat Phala Samapatti. The main thing emphasized here is the void, sunyato, and signless, animitto. The verse that follows emphasizes the above facts. Yassasava parikhina ahare cha anissito, sunyato animitto cha vimokho yassa gocharo, akaseva sakuntanang padang tassa durannayang. The qualities of the Arahant who has destroyed all influxes stated here are similar to those in the above verse. Those who have well comprehended the 4 types of nutriments will know that the path taken by the Arahant is untraceable because it is signless, animitta, and is undirected, appanihita. Now you understand why the Arahants are called Sankhaya Sevi Dhammatho Sankhang Nopeti Vedagu. Those Arahants do not come into reckoning means the worldlings do not recognize them. Once, the Brahmin youth Uttara, the pupil of Brahmin Brahmayu, curious to know how the Buddha partakes of food, and in order to examine his conduct, followed him for 7 months like a shadow. The outcome of it, an amazing account of the Buddha's daily routine, is given in the Brahmayu Sutta. The Buddha partakes of food contemplating on the 8 factors beginning with Nevadavaya, Namadaya. The most amazing revelation is that the Buddha is rasa patisangvedi bhagava nocha rasa raga patisangvedi. He is aware of taste. His taste buds are active, but there is no lust for taste. The reason is that his consciousness is void, sunya, and signless, animitta. Dear listeners, you must clearly understand that according to these 2 amazing verses, understanding the significance of nutriment at its depth does not imply giving up nutriment altogether. It is the elimination of craving and lust for nutriment that is required. Unless one reaches this stage, the ordinary mind gets established somewhere by the force of craving, whether we expect it or not. A film is produced either in a mother's womb or elsewhere. Everyone gets stuck there. Ayating punabbhavo. Another existence takes place here if consciousness and name and form go together. If the consciousness is removed, no name and form arises there. Even while the person is living, if the consciousness has released itself from the name and form, he does not seek a goal at death. The simile of the pavilion illustrated the mind that is signless. The sun's rays had no place to establish itself, whether on the wall, or on the earth, or on the water. Can you understand how deep the vision regarding nutriment is in the Dhamma? A correct understanding of nutriment, its arising, its cessation, and the path to the cessation of nutriment corresponding to the 4 Noble Truths, the final result would most certainly be arahanthood. There is nothing more for him to accomplish. Dear listeners, considering the above facts, please treat this discourse as a subject for meditation. You must not put it away as too deep. It is true that the Dhamma is very deep, but if you train your mind on the lines of radical attention, yoniso manasikara, the attainment of paths and fruits, magga phala, is not far away. Today, you have established yourselves on a higher sila and disciplined your mind in meditation. Not only the monks, but all those involved in meditation contemplate on the nutriments. If this contemplation is correctly perfected, it certainly leads to paths and fruits in the Dhamma. I wish this discourse would be instrumental in the attainment of spiritual heights of Sotapanna, stream entrant, Sakadagami, once returner, Anagami, non-returner, and Arahat, emancipation, and cross over this dreadful samsara. Whatever beings there be, from the lowest hell Avicii to the highest Brahma world, Akanita, may they rejoice in this discourse, and may they attain the peace of Nibbāna. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.